Yeah, this is actually something I use when I introduce myself to some classes. I work through my resume essentially backwards, where right now I am a school teacher. I've taught in everything from K to 12. I've done a lot of student services and special education helpful work like that as well. Last year I had the great pleasure of being the substitute librarian for a full year at one of our elementary schools here in Coquitlam. It was a beautiful job. And now I'm back on the TOC list, looking around to see what other jobs and schools become available in the summertime and in the early fall. But before that, my previous attempt at a career was with the RCMP. Before that, I worked in bars and restaurants and breweries, that sort of thing. Yellow Dog here in Port Moody, Superflux down in East Van, and the now unfortunately deceased Studio Brewing out in Burnaby. Before that, I worked in labor. I was a mover. Before that, I worked in campus security. Before that, I worked in a bakery. Before that, I was a martial arts instructor. And before that, I was the first dancing inflatable cup mascot outside of the local Booster Juice here in Port Moody. You know, I've always loved books in general. And it was when I was about second year in my arts degree was when I started reading more outside of the curriculum, let's say. And I had the great good fortune of having a professor that I clicked with, that we had a lot of things in common outside of the classroom. The fact that he was a fantastic explainer of things and was very, very interested in his students one-on-one or in the group. His name was Ariel Fuenzalida. And at the end of second year, after finishing his first class, I said, you know, I want to keep reading. I want to have something heady going on over the summertime. What do you recommend? And he says, I want you to go to whatever book outlet you want. You're going to type in the name Jorge Luis Borges, and you're going to get whatever you can. So Penguin a couple of years ago put together a collected stories of his. It's all of his little fiction short stories together. I got that. I read that. To this day, it is the reading experience that I use to mark all other reading experiences by. He's the greatest writer I've ever read, not only in terms of the unlimited imagination of his ideas, but now as I've grown up a little bit with the text, the sophistication of the language, the fact that he can turn phrases without winking at you and trying to be clever in this sort of way. And so from that one book, the first strand of this web was spun, which then led me to other books and other books and other books and other books that have connected on themselves. And very fortunately, this is a never-ending hobby. If you are interested in books, if you are interested in stories, there's always one more. There's always another author. There's always another country that you can find their works in translation. I mean, I read in English and I read in French. You can get like, I'm sure this figure isn't literally accurate, but like 80% of every book that's ever been written that's worth reading gets translated into one of those languages or was written in one of those languages. I mean, I don't want this to sound too hallmarky, but at the basis of all love has to be participation. And at some point, if I am just a reader, well, maybe I just love reading, and that's its own hobby. That's totally fine. But to then love literature means that at some point I want to throw myself into it. I want to test myself against other great writers that have come before. I mean, I don't know that I'll get quite to this level, but there was a line of Samuel Beckett's, that's the last line in Deirdre Bayer's biography, which is he wanted to leave a stain upon the silence. Now that's very Beckett, and that's really, really great, but that idea of I would hate to go through all the decades of my life and not have thrown something out, trying to get it to stick onto the larger culture, consciousness, community, culture, words that don't begin with C as well. Yeah, so Broken Water is, as mentioned in that byline, and when I started pitching it, it was always, this book is about an atheist that tries to become a priest. Gets enough interest out of the crowd here, but to lead you through the first bit of the story here, so Declan Murphy has just come home from university. He's got an arts degree, you know, he's 21, 22 years old, isn't quite fully sure what he wants to do, and finds himself in a job market that is also unkind, let's say. So while he is trying to work through the finer points of a LinkedIn profile, a summation of his life, he just finds that there's nothing that perfectly encapsulates him, nothing that fits. And he thinks the dream is calling out to him to say, you belong in the Catholic priesthood. The unfortunate thing is he left the church when he was a teenager. And the double unfortunate thing is that the family with which he still lives did not. And it turns out there's a little bit of tension between his choice to leave and they're trying to keep their family unit together and fine, that for him to then come out and say, I figured it out, now's the chance where I'm going to go and try and lead this thing from the inside, well, causes a rift much larger than he expects. But he's so frustrated that he won't give up on this dream, because if he doesn't have that, he has nothing. So this book is basically the summer in which Declan tries in all earnestness to become a Catholic priest, while also on this other side trying to mend the relations between the other members of his family. The conflict is a conflict that I think faces anybody when they are at about that age of, who will I really be? Not just who am I? That's a question, I mean, we can ask that to anybody, whether they're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, but who am I going to be soon in another way? And he has enough of a headstrong stubbornness to him that he really thinks he can get through on this path of contradiction. Now, he does have a little bit of help. See, while he was leaving the church, he had a mentor. Turns out the mentor is the local Catholic priest, a guy by the name of Father Lou Rogers. And so to help him out through this journey, he ends up going back trying to make amends with Father Rogers as well. And as readers will find out, Father Rogers may genuinely be one of the most delightful characters you will ever read. Certainly read soon, certainly read by a book that's come out recently. When I'm getting notes back from either people I know that have read it or people that I don't know that have read it, in the first paragraph or so, it's, oh my God, Father Rogers, what a beautiful man. He's one of those guys that you really hope when you are in this stage of your life is around. Doesn't have to be there all the time, doesn't have to be there to tell you what to do, but he is someone that when you are going through these bits of conflict and unease, you can ask him anything, non-judgmentally. He might take a second to really sit and think about his answer. He might answer it on a tangent, but by the end of it, you might feel like you've gone on a journey with him. About things being made in Canada and looking towards Canada, in a few words, it's about damn time. Like, here we have a country that's been around for over 150 years, and yet, I think if you were to poll the average citizen and you ask them about topics of Canadian history, they might start scratching at their head and looking around at something else more interesting to talk about. And yet, our country is full of it. Every single country is, right? I mean, the train itself. The idea that Sir John A. is like, the way I'm going to keep my country secure is by making essentially a second steel border. I have no money for this, and I'm going to do it anyway. And then we're going to make this one, and that's not going to be good enough. We're going to make an offshoot line that goes off it as well. Again, I have no money for this, but we're going to do it anyway. And this is the crucible in which our country starts. And you get characters popping up throughout Canadian history. Like, I've only thought about this book. I haven't written it yet. But if I were to write a historical fiction, it would be about the life and times of a guy by the name of Clifford Sifton, who I think, in the right hands, possibly these ones, what could be done to his story is what Lin-Manuel Miranda did for Alexander Hamilton's story. Of this one that's been in the country the whole time, the story is available, it's public knowledge. Sifton still has some grandchildren or great-grandchildren walking around Manitoba. But this guy was an unstoppable iron horse of work, figured out that if I buy up a whole bunch of newspapers, I can control public opinion, gets himself into Laurier's cabinet to become Minister of Immigration, comes up with the last best West policy, and is the direct reason why Canadian demographics are what they are, especially in the middle of the country. One guy. Like, this is an incredible story. This is an incredible person, and you might get a paragraph or two about him in a Crossroads High School textbook.